Senator Ferdinand.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Before I respond or add my voice to the presentation, to the motion on the table, allow me, Madam, to join you and Minister for Culture in expressing condolences to the family of the late cultural activist, Joyce Ogist. I also want to, at this time, acknowledge and extend condolences to a former national footballer and referee. I consider myself a very close member of the football and sports fraternity. Although he had his struggles, but we remember him as a very outstanding footballer and referee in his time. And I speak of Hilary St. Martin, known as Franco, used to be seen on the boulevard very often, who has been laid to rest. And I express condolences to his family and the football fraternity. I also want to do the same, extend condolences to Brother Romanus Neptune, very close friend and family member, who we lost in the community a couple of weeks ago. This morning, we are here as the Senate to decide whether we are going to give support to the government's decision or proposition to extend a state of emergency from the 4th of June to the 30th of September, a further 4 months. And my colleague described it as another 122 days. We need, as we do so, to recognize, Madam President, that this is a very serious undertaking. This is not something that we just talk about. We have had a state of emergency for a while now, and I think we've all gone through the experience and we've seen how different factions of the society have responded to the situation. At this point, we know that some things are necessary, and the government in situations like this has to make important decisions. But we must be mindful of how the people on the ground, the various sectors of our society are being affected and how they respond, so that we can do what is best in the interest of everyone. I agree that we need to keep our citizens safe, and we need to do whatever we can to maintain that level of assurance among our people. But, Madam President, up to last night, the 27th of May, 2020, the Chief Medical Officer, the CMO, by the way, someone I have a lot of regard and respect for, formidable woman. Under these circumstances, we should be very proud that we have such a leader. We have to be. She was on TV last night on the HTS News, indicating that the last 41 cases that were tested within the last 24 days, well, today makes it 25, have all turned out to be negative. And that we have had about 382 cases, although the minister gave a figure that's slightly higher this morning, so I will leave that to be decided on. And she also indicated that since May 3rd, 2020, this year, we have not had a positive case of COVID-19 in our country. So the CMO was reassuring us as a country that so far as a country we've been able to bring some level of control. We've been able to have some measure of confidence in what we're doing, and that the country is doing something to contain the spread of the virus. I think we should all be very pleased with that. Madam President, the problem I have with what's happening is while our CMO is telling us that, as we see, the curve is leveling, that we are beginning to experience some kind of stability regarding the situation. That the government is coming. Now remember, she made that statement last night. And the night or the day before, the government was here, or at least at the lower house, seeking to extend the state of emergency. Now, Madam President, this morning, we are fortunate in this Senate to have the Minister for Health as a leader of government business, who I believe is well placed to address issues relating to public health, if not the best person to do so. And having heard the CMO last night, I came this morning and I said, well, let's listen to how our colleague is going to address this matter as it's presented to the House. Madam President, what I heard from the leader of government business this morning was that it was an indication, and she was again going according to the CMO. According to the CMO, that is what the leader of government business indicated, that if we reopen our borders, and I want to paraphrase a little, she can correct me if I'm not accurate. If we reopen our borders, we anticipate a resurgence of cases. A resurgence of cases. Are the words of the Minister for Health, Madam President, sitting in the Senate, as she gave an account of the CMO's advice. If we reopen our borders, we anticipate a resurgence of cases. So, Madam President, if that is what the
leader of government business.
Just on a point of clarification, Madam President, Madam Elucidation, what I read was a quote from the CMO, and she gave me that to put in my notes. And I can read it again because it says resurgence. So if I forgot to say it's a quote, it was a quote.
Madam President, that would be necessary. I am quite happy to know that what the minister read was a quote from the CMO. The same CMO that I just referred to as having exhibited or demonstrated exemption in a crisis situation. So it tells us that this CMO knows what she's about. The CMO is not crazy. She knows what she's about. She has advised the minister well. And she's telling the minister, as she has confirmed, she read a quote from the CMO. It's not myself or the opposition that is telling the minister or telling the government that if we reopen the borders, there is likely to be a resurgence of cases. The CMO is saying that to us. Yet, we are here to extend the state of emergency and at the same time, reopen our borders. What is that telling us about our attitude towards the advice of a professional who is competent and has demonstrated outstanding leadership in this country? As a government, what are we saying to our professionals? What are we saying? Is that opinion of any value? Now, if we feel so capable as a government, and that although the CMO has indicated that there's a possibility of resurgence of cases, that we feel we can go ahead, what is it that we have demonstrated that we can do or we can put in place to mitigate against that likelihood? If we really think that we can ignore what the CMO has just said. Madam President, I find it very difficult. There is no logic in what is happening, that the government, the leader of government business as a minister for health, comes to the House, expresses a professional opinion by someone who has demonstrated competence and leadership through a crisis, has helped, because of her leadership, to allow us to experience a level of comfort, a level of stability, where we can say that we have no more cases or no recorded cases for at least 25 days in this country. Yet, we are hell-bent on going ahead with an extended state of emergency and opening up our borders. And opening up our borders to whom? United States of America. Number one, in terms of cases, deaths in the world. What are we doing? Madam President, it makes no sense. There's no logic. I do not understand it. I do not. I hope that someone on this side will be able to justify or explain this. There is no logic in it. Madam President, if no one else from the lower house, from any other department, I expected to have come to this house to demonstrate some kind of good sense in that regard. I expected it to have been the leader of government business. But I must say, Madam President, that this morning it is actually the worst I've seen in that regard. While we are opening the borders and while we extend the state of emergency, it's telling us that our small business people who own their bars, their snack shops, and as we say in Creole, who have to toll away their little goods and make a little something, they have to be the ones who have all those restrictions to deal with. How could that be equitable? We have a Ministry of Equity and Social Justice in this government. Where is the equity? Now, we behave sometimes as a legislature, which is what we are, that we do things because we have no choice, that our hands are tied and we really have to do it. And sometimes our Prime Minister makes it sound that we have tough decisions to make. Yes, we have tough decisions to make. But let's make those tough decisions using what is available to us. There are two facilities that are available to us. We are behaving in this honorable house as a legislature, Madam President, as if the only way we can manage going forward with the COVID situation, the economy, and stability is by extending a state of emergency. That's how we are positioning ourselves. That's what we are saying. Madam President, as a legislature, that is why I use the word legislature. There is legislation, there is alternative legislation in place that can help us as a government, as a people, to achieve the very same things that we are trying to achieve through a state of emergency extension. And I'll mention three examples, Madam President, 3 examples. We already have in place legislation that can assist us, and I speak of, for example, the Quarantine Act. We have a Quarantine Act that is available to us, that we can apply. We also have the Public Health Act. I invite the Minister to check it out. We also have the Disaster Emergency Act. And I think another member of the government, the government side here, has an astute interest in law. Maybe we should look at these. These pieces of legislation do exist. We have them at our disposal. Why aren't we applying the principles or the powers that they provide us to manage going forward? Why is it that we are hell-bent on having an extension of a state of emergency? So there are options. And I think every St. Lucian will agree that the intention of extending a state of emergency has to be something that is in their best interest. But if they realize that you are doing something, you're taking away all those privileges that my previous colleague spoke about, they are giving up all of this. But what you the power that the extraordinary to the government, the Prime Minister, is being used to do what? When that could have been achieved with other legislation that is already there. So that raises suspicion. It causes people to become very anxious. And there also becomes an issue with trust. Now, Madam President, one of the issues that we will have to face is one of those that the leader of government business raised earlier. It's a very real issue, and it's something that is very close to my heart, having been part of that profession all my life. We know that there is an intention for schools to reopen next week, 4th of June. And we've been in situations in this country before where, whether it was because of a natural disaster or some other difficulty, that teachers make tough decisions when it comes to our students' welfare. There was some time when we had an impasse between the government and the unions, and our teachers had to go back to school, Madam President. And despite the differences, they made the sacrifice on behalf of the students because exams were coming up and they wanted to give the students the best chance of succeeding. Madam President, we have declared that we want to extend the state of emergency. And students, we are now in the month of May, and we have national exams in the form of common entrance. We also have regional exams in the form of CXC, CSEC, KIP. And of course, every parent, every teacher, every St. Lucian who has a child who has to write these exams knows the value and how high stake these exams are. So we believe that a government would be concerned and sensitive to that situation. We want to give our students the best chance of succeeding, give our teachers the best conditions within which, or the best conditions that are available for them to assist the students in succeeding. So I cannot stand here and say that we should or should not reopen school next week. But what I can say is that if during this time, the Ministry of Education, the government has decided that we want to give our students an opportunity to return to school during this COVID-19 situation, during this COVID-19 period, with an extended state of emergency, we need to be prepared to respond to the realities that they face. The leader of government business indicated this morning that we are looking forward to reopening school on Monday. But Madam President, the unions and the teachers have made it very clear that they have legitimate concerns. Not Monday, I'm sorry, Tuesday, the 4th of May, right? So the 4th of June, I'm sorry, right, which is next week. Madam President, I stand corrected in terms of the words of the leader of government business, but she alluded to the reopening of school, which is coming up very soon. And I'm saying that as a country, if we are going to ask students and teachers to return to school after such a period, a long period of time, where they've been using e-learning and online facilities, we have to make sure that we are doing it right. Because there isn't much time between now and common entrance. The common entrance exam has been dated, Madam President. It is supposed to be the last week of June. So the students have just about 3 weeks. And we must make sure that these 3 weeks are properly maximized and utilized. We do not want the students to go back into school where the teachers are unhappy, the parents are anxious, the children have all issues, and they are preparing for exams. There is something called test anxiety, and children going to prepare for examinations at 11 years, Madam President, will have a lot of anxiety and pressure on them. With the government, there we are telling people that they should return to work. We have a state of emergency, but we're telling them go back to work, and we want the students to succeed. I want the students to succeed. I want the teachers to do the best they can for the students. But listen to their concerns. So is that state of emergency extension a tool that allows the government, the Prime Minister, and the government to have the teachers, the unions, the trade unions, and their leaders with their hands tied behind their back while the government does whatever it wants? You can't protest. You can't have any form of public gathering, right? No public expression. So if the teachers have had 25 issues that they have raised in writing, you have not addressed any of them, but you're putting them back into the schools. Grade 6 teachers. Madam President, if you go into the secondary school, it's even more complicated. Because if you send the Form 5s to the school, all teachers who teach Form 5 have to be active. Now, whereas in a primary school, you may have one teacher teaching a classroom or a grade, so it may affect 1 or 2 or 3, maybe the special needs person. But in a secondary school, it's more complex. You may have 5 Form 5s, but you may have as many as 20 teachers who have to be interacting with the students, and among whom the work is shared. Have we taken that into consideration? So you may be asking, on average, in our 19 secondary schools, 20 teachers to go back to school where their concerns have not been addressed, and we are in a state of emergency. So the unions can't do anything for them, and they're going back to school. So you put the teachers in a dilemma. They have to choose between their conscience, going back, not having their issues addressed, and having to do, or that they're just not going to go or do something that is unconscionable. And I know our teachers will not do it, Madam President. I was in a classroom for 25 years, plus. I was in a principal's chair for more than 10 years. And I know that our teachers are not like that. They want to do the best they can for the students. It is not fair to put them in that dilemma. It is not fair, Madam President. We know a state of emergency does not allow them to be able to express public opinion. The medium through which they can show their grievances will be taken away from them. And then the concerns that have been expressed legitimately by the unions in writing have not been addressed. But state of emergency continues. Teachers and students go back to school on the 4th of June. Exams high stake. Parents are on their case because they want their children to succeed. The principals and DEOs and the chief education officer and the PS, everybody is looking because they want us, the students, to succeed. We want our country's profile in CXC to remain as it is. But under what conditions are we sending our teachers back to school? And we say we want to extend state of emergency. Have we made any provisions to address the concerns? Madam President, this is a situation that can become very, very volatile. And at this point, as a teacher, as an educator, I believe that my voice is the voice of these people. And they must have a voice. They may not have it on the streets, but I think they have it today in Parliament. Yeah. And we need to let people know, our government and all concerned know, that these are not just petty issues. We have 2,000 plus students who are going to face the common entrance this year. We have many more writing CX. We have heard that some of the tertiary level institutions are even asking now that students who are going to apply for matriculation to be enrolled in further in their education submit their Form 4 and maybe Form 3 transcripts to back up what's going on this year, meaning that they are becoming a little bit concerned about the validity and the reliability of the CXCs. That's a serious concern, and yet we are not trying to address it. So, Madam President, I believe that as we go ahead with this extension of the state of emergency, the government, the Ministry of Education needs to rethink that situation. Do not put the teachers back into the classroom without addressing their concerns. It is not going to be productive. It will not be. Where you have happy workers, you have productive workers. People are happy at work, they will produce. You don't have to stand behind them with a, you know, as a policeman. They will do their work, but give them the conditions they require. We have issues with water, school safety, student safety. All of these are important. So we need to address that and ensure that all our teachers are comfortable. Madam President, I will now area that is of serious concern. I was watching the news last night, and there was a clip on the regional news that reminded me of something that the Prime Minister said, that he was taking a cue from regional leaders as he goes ahead to extend the state of emergency. I think it was mentioned previously that Trinidad and Tobago and St. Vincent have not had a state of emergency, but that does not necessarily dictate to us what we must do. So we may be neither here or there on that matter. But one thing I realized last night from the news was that the Bajan Prime Minister, who is incidentally the chair of CARICOM, another formidable woman I have a lot of respect for, she made a statement as she addressed concerns about reopening the economy or doing exactly what we want to do. I think that question was posed to her. And you remember, Madam President, Barbados is considered a hub in the region, like Antigua, in terms of the international flights and tourist arrivals. That's a very important part of the economy. So if you're in Barbados or in Antigua, you would have serious concerns now with, closing down your ports and so on. But here's what the Barbadian president said, Prime Minister said. She indicated that they are in no rush. We are in no rush as a country. And that she indicated also that we must govern. I never said that. I never said that. The Barbados Prime Minister indicated that there must be no rush in reopening the economy or in anything we do regarding the arrival of visitors. And she also indicated that whatever we do, in whatever we do, we must ensure that we govern for tomorrow and not for today. That's a very powerful statement. Whatever we are going to do today, we have to think of the implications of tomorrow. And if we govern for today according to her, we may be compromising the very ground on which we stand. And that is why that statement reminded me of what was said in the lower house. Now, Madam President, Barbados clearly is not prepared to put their people at risk. And given the advice of the CMO, who indicated that we may be putting, there may be a resurgence of cases if we reopen our borders, I think we should take heed of these serious, serious warnings. So, Madam President, here we are with a people who are becoming very anxious. Professionals, teachers, regular citizens, hearing that the state of emergency has been extended. They have been under a bit of stress. They are concerned about what's going to happen, but we're going ahead with it. And so what we get out of that, Madam President, is a lot of frustration and people feeling that they're suppressed and feeling that their voice is being taken away from them. And when that happens, you get a reaction. And I'm wondering whether that has something to do with all the barricades that we saw on Tuesday. Is it that the government is fully aware that its actions is sufficiently agitating the people that it feels that it needs to now set up barricades before Parliament? Madam President, on June last year when we came to this house for the opening of Parliament, I was coming here for the first time. When you got outside there, people wanted to hug and kiss and, excitement among the people. They loved what was happening, on both sides. Supporters, people came out and they were shouting and waving and enjoying the presence of parliamentarians on both sides, particularly the government that had just won the election. Now, in 2016, 4 years later, where are these people? They have been replaced by barricades. They do not want, you do not expect them to want to hug you now and cheer you on, And because of COVID, yes, you may not have been able to hug them, but they would still want to give you a wave. Where are these people? They've been replaced by barricades, Madam President. That is an indication of the mood of the people. And it seems that the government has read that. And I think the only way you can read something like that is if you know that you're contributing to it. So, Madam President, the signs are there that St. Lucians aren't just, okay with this extension. The signs are there. It's not about the opposition. It's not the opposition that the barricades were put out there for, because we were coming to the house. It was not for us. Madam President, finally, I mentioned that there's a that we're not using. But Madam President, I think that after all that I have seen, after all that I have heard, now that I have seen that the chairs have been replaced with boos and the people are speaking out, I think the state of emergency at this point, for me, I'm interpreting it as a tool that is being used by the government to suppress the people, to keep their hands tied behind their backs. As the government does what it wants, the people will not be able to react under normal circumstances. And so, I cannot stand here, Madam President, and support this. I cannot stand here to support a decision that seems to be going against the direct advice of a well-respected chief medical officer. I cannot stand here in this house and support the leader of government business as a minister for health, despite reading, quoting the chief medical officer, sending the warning signals, and support the extension of a state of emergency and reopening of our borders. I cannot.
Senator, you have 15 more minutes.
I'm wrapping up, Madam President. So, Madam President, in a democracy like ours, where I believe that this move is taking away our right to public expression, it's taking away some things that the government knows very well, that could have armed our St. Lucian public to speak out. It's taking away the people's right to speak. I see it not as a democracy, but as a dictatorship. This is a democracy. And as long as this remains a democracy, I stand in this honorable house to support anything that has a semblance of dictatorship in it. So, Madam President, on that basis, I will not support this motion on the basis of what I have described. I thank you, Madam President.